In this third segment, I want to discuss individual achievement. And so, individual achievement is one of the virtues of our culture these days. Being productive, being successful, accomplishing things, those are all things that are highly valued just across the board where we live. And a lack of achievement usually just gets translated as you're a failure. Individual achievement and trying to keep up with that is often like trying to keep a balloon that's just been blown up, just keeping it into the air, trying to keep it off the floor. And it can be exhausting after a while. And of course, this has always been the case. And so, how is that? If that's one of those areas that we probably should be constantly addressing as Christians, where do we find our achievement? Do we find our identity in our achievement? And of course, as Christians, we should not. We should find our identity in Christ. But in the pandemic, there are ways that this has probably been exposed more than in other times. And so for most people, our avenues for achievement have been either drastically altered or they've been removed altogether. So work, for example, has probably suffered for a lot of people. Some are having to overwork. If you're an essential worker, you're probably working more than you ever have. If you are not an essential worker, then your productivity has probably suffered. Maybe because you're working from home, or maybe because the nature of your work has just changed. You know, you're expected to do 3 things in a day, and now it's 10 things in a day. And there's just all these extra layers of expectations. Additionally, things outside of our work, if you're married, if you have kids, there's all the things that maybe come with that, like being able to go out on date nights is very, very different, or not even a possibility at times. Schools are closed, gyms are closed, sports leagues are closed. A lot of the things that you might do for fun are closed. You can't go to the movies, you can't go to concerts. All these things where you might have attached an identity to achievement has been cut off or just severely disfigured and changed. And even time itself, sometimes just being able to wake up the next day and know that the calendar date has changed feels like a win. But now time itself is so fluid. Time seems to stand still. It's like Groundhog Day. Every day is the same. And so waking up in the morning, you don't know if it's Monday or Friday or Sunday. You really have no idea. And so even the smallest things like that, individual achievements, seem to have been diminished quite a bit. And so in our groups, you may be seeing this. You may be experiencing it yourself and seeing the effects that this is having on people. I know for me personally, I like creating lists of things to do and then knocking out those lists. Now, I said in a different video that we moved during this. So leading up to that, we had a lot of stuff to get done. Afterwards, we had a lot of things to do. We had boxes to unpack. We had things to put together. We had things to arrange and find out where this goes and where that goes. But of course, all of that began to stop. You get to a point where you've unpacked the boxes that you can unpack at this point in time, and then it started to sink into me, like I can't get as much done at home, and certainly work has changed, and kids' activities have been pretty much non-existent for quite a while, and so you end up hitting a wall like I did, and where you start feeling like I don't like this. I don't like the feeling that I'm not being productive, like I'm not achieving anything. Well, in a book that I looked over during this, had another quote that had caught my eye, and it says, "Communities are truly communities when they are open to others, when they remain vulnerable and humble, when the members are growing in love, in compassion, and in humility." Now, what I've noticed about individual achievement is it typically does the opposite. It doesn't make you vulnerable and humble. It makes you protect yourself and be prideful. And I know that's true in me. That's very true in many people. And when we have a community that's based on achievement, so get this, like you can't meet the ways that you were meeting 6 months ago. That may be for you as a leader a way where you feel like a failure because you're not achieving anything. And so you're trying to keep the balloon in air of people engaging over Zoom or getting you to call you back or message you back on Marco Polo. You are being exposed, your vulnerability, all of our vulnerabilities are being exposed through this. And we're being humbled by it. And so I'm learning, and I hope and I want to encourage you to learn to not push back against that, but to embrace what the Lord may be teaching you in that. Because when we embrace vulnerability and humility, then we can start growing in love and in compassion with one another. So where's our hope in that? Well, Jesus said in John 15, he said that I'm the vine, you're the branches. The one who remains in me and I in him produces much fruit, because you can do nothing without me. And later in verse 9, he says, as the Father has loved me, I also loved you. Remain in my love. So if you have bouts, or if people in your group have bouts of being unproductive and feeling like failures, remember that we need to stay attached to the vine. Yes, Jesus talks about producing much fruit, so there's productivity there, but that's not the goal. Jesus doesn't say, I want you to be productive. He says that I want you to remain in my love. Remember to abide in the vine, abide in Christ's love. Our productivity doesn't matter so much as understanding God's presence. And this is true for you just like it is for me. But this is also the only hope that we have to offer anybody else. We can't offer them hope that they're going to go back to being productive immediately or in the future. We don't control that. But what we do know is that we can remain in Christ's love. And that is the deepest form of peace that we will ever find. Eventually, remaining connected to the vine will produce fruit. But that is a downstream kind of effect from us upstream clinging to the vine of who Jesus is. And so our personal responsibility, as it is others, is just to be diligent in staying connected to what Jesus is doing, to remain in his love. And so as I close out these segments, I'm going to wrap up in one final segment and give some final thoughts on this. But guys, remember, our productivity of keeping people connected and keeping the balloon of all the meetings together. We're doing personal in-person gatherings on this night and Zoom gatherings on this night, and we're texting. Yes, keep it up. Keep in contact with people. But our success, and any of our success as a community, is connected to Jesus, not in our productivity of checking off the boxes. So be encouraged where you may be discouraged. Have hope that Christ sees you. He wants you to recognize your vulnerability and be humble before him so that he can provide you with a new sense of his love and his presence. And I feel like if we remember those things, we will be able to receive hope and also give that to others in our groups.